This story was submitted by someone we'll call Jessica, a 26-year-old marketing professional who frequently traveled for work. Jessica had used Airbnb dozens of times without incident and considered herself an experienced traveler who knew how to stay safe. In March of last year, Jessica booked a highly rated apartment in Portland for a week-long business trip. The listing had excellent reviews, professional photos, and a host with a verified profile. The apartment was exactly as advertised: clean, modern, and in a safe neighborhood. On her second night there, Jessica was video calling her boyfriend when he made a comment that changed everything. He said he could see a small red light blinking behind her in the video call. Jessica turned around but couldn't see anything obvious. Her boyfriend insisted there was definitely a tiny red light near the bookshelf behind the couch. Jessica ended the call and began investigating. Hidden behind a decorative plant on the bookshelf, she found a small device that looked like a phone charger but had a tiny camera lens. When she examined it closely, she could see the small red recording light her boyfriend had spotted. Horrified, Jessica began searching the entire apartment. What she found made her sick to her stomach. There were hidden cameras in the living room, kitchen, and most disturbing of all, the bedroom. Each device was cleverly disguised as everyday objects: smoke detectors, picture frames, even a fake electrical outlet. Jessica immediately called the police and documented everything with her phone. While waiting for officers to arrive, she received a text message from an unknown number. "You're very photogenic. Hope you're enjoying your stay." The police arrived within 20 minutes and confirmed that the devices were indeed recording equipment. Some appeared to be live streaming, meaning Jessica had been watched in real time during her entire stay. The officers advised her to pack immediately and find alternative accommodations. What happened next was almost worse than finding the cameras. The Airbnb host, a man in his 40s who had seemed perfectly normal during check-in, arrived at the apartment while police were still there. Instead of acting surprised or outraged by the discovery, he calmly claimed the cameras were for security purposes and were clearly disclosed in the listing. This was a complete lie. Jessica had screenshots of the original listing that mentioned no security cameras whatsoever. The host then became aggressive, demanding that Jessica delete the photos she'd taken and threatening to charge her for damaging his property by removing the cameras. Police arrested the host on the spot. The investigation revealed that he had been recording guests for years and had accumulated hundreds of hours of footage. Some videos had been uploaded to inappropriate websites, and other female guests had unknowingly been victimized in the same way. Jessica learned that this wasn't an isolated incident. The host owned several rental properties around the city, all equipped with similar hidden surveillance systems. He had specifically targeted young women traveling alone, often offering discounts to encourage bookings. The case made local news, and several other victims came forward. Jessica sued both the host and Airbnb, arguing that the platform's verification system had failed to protect guests from a predator. The host was eventually sentenced to 3 years in prison, but the psychological damage to his victims was permanent. Jessica no longer uses Airbnb and thoroughly inspects any hotel room she stays in. She now travels with a small RF detector that can identify hidden cameras and always covers or unplugs any device that could potentially contain recording equipment. This account comes from someone we'll call Marcus, a 34-year-old software engineer who was attending a conference in Chicago. Marcus had booked a room at what appeared to be a reputable mid-range hotel near the convention center. The hotel seemed legitimate. Professional staff, clean lobby, standard check-in procedures. Marcus's room was on the 4th floor and appeared normal in every way. He attended his conference events during the day and returned to the hotel each evening without incident. On his third night, Marcus woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of his hotel room door opening. In his half-asleep state, he initially thought it might be housekeeping, but then realized how absurd that would be at 2 a.m. Marcus lay still, pretending to be asleep, as he heard footsteps moving around his room. Through barely opened eyes, Marcus could see a figure moving through his belongings. The person was using a small flashlight and methodically searching through Marcus's luggage, laptop bag, and personal items. What was most disturbing was how quietly and efficiently the intruder moved. This clearly wasn't their first time. Marcus remained motionless, afraid that confronting the intruder might escalate the situation dangerously. After about 10 minutes, the person left as quietly as they had entered. Marcus heard the distinct sound of a keycard being used to lock the door from the outside. The next morning, Marcus discovered that nothing had been stolen, which made the intrusion even more unsettling. Why would someone break into a hotel room just to look through belongings without taking anything? Marcus reported the incident to the front desk, but the staff seemed oddly unconcerned and claimed there was no record of anyone accessing his room. Marcus asked to review security footage, but was told the cameras in the hallway had been malfunctioning during the night. The hotel manager offered to move him to a different room, but something about their casual response felt wrong. Marcus decided to set up his phone to record his room before leaving for the conference that day. When Marcus reviewed the footage that evening, he was shocked by what he saw. The same person had entered his room again during the day, but this time they weren't just searching. They were installing something. The intruder had placed a small device behind the television and another near the bathroom door. Marcus realized the devices were likely recording equipment, similar to what Jessica had found in her Airbnb. He also noticed that the intruder was wearing a hotel staff uniform and moved through the room with the familiarity of someone who had access to multiple rooms. Instead of confronting hotel management, Marcus called the police directly. When officers arrived, they found the recording devices exactly where Marcus had seen them placed. The devices were sophisticated and appeared to be part of a larger surveillance network within the hotel. The investigation revealed that several hotel employees were involved in a scheme to record guests and sell footage to online voyeurism sites. They specifically targeted business travelers who would be in their rooms alone and were unlikely to return to the same hotel. The hotel had been operating this scheme for months, with staff using master key cards to access rooms whenever guests were away. They would install temporary recording equipment, monitor guests during their stay, then remove the devices before checkout to avoid detection. Marcus learned that he had been specifically chosen because his registration indicated he was traveling alone and staying for multiple nights. The staff had been watching his schedule and knew exactly when his room would be empty for installation and removal of equipment. Multiple hotel employees were arrested, and the hotel's business license was revoked. Marcus received a settlement from the hotel chain, but like Jessica, the experience fundamentally changed how he approaches travel accommodations. He now exclusively stays in large chain hotels with corporate oversight and always conducts thorough room inspections upon arrival. The final story comes from someone we'll call David, a 28-year-old teacher who had planned a solo hiking trip to Colorado. David found what seemed like a perfect cabin rental on a popular vacation website. Secluded location, beautiful photos, and reviews praising the peaceful atmosphere. The booking process seemed normal. David paid through the website's secure payment system and received confirmation emails with check-in instructions. The host, who went by the name Sarah, was responsive to messages and provided detailed directions to the property. The drive to the cabin took David deep into a remote mountain area with spotty cell phone coverage. After following the directions for over an hour on increasingly narrow roads, he finally reached the location. The cabin matched the photos perfectly, rustic but well-maintained, surrounded by forest, exactly what David had hoped for. David parked and approached the front door, where he found a lockbox containing the key, just as Sarah had instructed. The cabin was unlocked and appeared ready for guests. Everything seemed legitimate until David tried to connect to the Wi-Fi network that had been advertised in the listing. When David couldn't get online, he decided to walk to a nearby ridge where he had noticed cell phone signal earlier. As he was walking, he encountered a local resident who was surprised to see him. The neighbor asked if David was lost, explaining that the cabin he was staying in had been abandoned for years. According to the neighbor, the cabin's real owner had died 3 years ago, and the property had been sitting empty while family members disputed the inheritance. No one had permission to rent it, and certainly no one named Sarah had any connection to the property. David immediately tried to call the host, but the phone number went to voicemail. When he returned to the cabin to gather his belongings, he found that someone had been inside while he was gone. His luggage had been moved, and there were signs that someone was searching through his things. Most alarming was what David found in the cabin's back room, evidence that someone had been living there recently. There were personal belongings, food supplies, and what appeared to be surveillance equipment pointed toward the main living areas. David realized he had walked into someone's illegal squatting operation. As David was hastily packing his car, a truck pulled up the driveway. Two men got out and approached him aggressively, demanding to know what he was doing on their property. When David explained about the Airbnb rental, they claimed to have no knowledge of any booking and accused him of trespassing. The situation escalated quickly. The men insisted that David had been deceived and needed to come with them to sort things out. They blocked his car with their truck and began demanding to see his identification and rental confirmation. David realized this was likely the endgame of whatever scam he had stumbled into. David managed to convince the men that he needed to retrieve something from inside the cabin. Once inside, he called 911 from the landline phone that surprisingly still worked. He whispered his location and situation to the operator, then returned outside acting as if everything was normal. Police took over an hour to reach the remote location, but their arrival caused the men to flee immediately. Officers confirmed that the cabin was indeed abandoned, and that David had been the victim of an elaborate rental scam designed to lure victims to isolated locations. The investigation revealed that the scammers had been using photos of various abandoned properties to create fake listings on multiple vacation rental sites. They would collect payment from unsuspecting travelers, then rob them when they arrived at the remote locations. In some cases, victims had been held for ransom, or worse. David learned that several other travelers had fallen victim to similar scams in the area. The remote locations were specifically chosen because poor cell coverage would delay any calls for help, and the isolation made victims easy targets for robbery or worse crimes. The fake listing was removed from the website, but David never recovered his rental payment. More importantly, he realized how close he had come to serious harm. The scammers had been prepared to hold him against his will, and his quick thinking with the 911 call may have saved his life. David no longer books accommodations in remote areas, and always verifies property ownership through multiple sources before traveling to unfamiliar locations. He also shares his travel plans with multiple people, and checks in regularly when staying in isolated areas.